Hi, and welcome back to The Current. This is Pastor Chris Nafis of Living Water Church, and today, very blessed to have joining us two of my favorite people who I've got to work closely with over the last several years as we have developed some programming around trauma in our church. Two expressive art therapists who are involved in restorative justice and just actual art and performance. Jamie Rosen and Sook Kyoung Kwon. These two are amazing. They're so much fun to be around. They're such a joy to have working alongside of us. And many in our church have gotten to know at least Sook Kyoung, and some of us have gotten to know Jamie also. They are just a blessing to be around. It's always a joy to have conversation with them. And I was really blessed to be able to sit down with them and talk about trauma and art and creativity and spirituality and how all of these things go together. So I hope you'll enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Here it is. All right, Jamie and Sook Kyoung, thank you guys so much for coming on to this podcast. It's like you are some of my favorite people. It's been such a joy to work. How many years have we worked together now?
Well, you guys knew each other first.
Yeah, so
yeah.
It was before COVID.
A long time for Sook Kyoung and I. Yeah,
like 16, 17.
Yeah, 2016, something. We were doing the women's tea and some of the stuff, and then we got into the flow groups, and then Jamie came along, and that was maybe 2021.
Yeah,
it was before COVID too.
Yeah, was it?
No, it's during COVID.
It was
Yeah,
during.
it was during, I think. Yeah.
We started to, build the program during COVID, and then right after COVID, we started our first group.
Yeah. Well, we've had like a lot of meetings, and every time it's just like a joy to be with you too, because you're just like joyful, pleasant people who are so like thoughtful and kind and have been really generous with your time. And so thank you all for giving a little bit more of your time for us today.
Well, the feeling is mutual.
I thought I'd ask, so both of you are art therapists, and I thought...
Expressive art
therapists. I'm sorry, I'm glad you expressed that.
That's very important.
Yes. I was just saying before we started, like, I don't even think I know the full story of how each of you kind of got into this work, and specifically because you both have also, our work at Living Water has focused a lot on trauma and learning about trauma theory and how this affects kind of our spirituality and our ability to do what we want to do. But how did you all get into, first of all, expressive arts, and then how did that lead you into doing all this work in trauma that you guys have been doing for longer than I've known you, I think?
Well, I'm going to defer to Sook Kyoung first for her story because she met you first. And that's through her beautiful experience that I got to work with Living Water and you.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Korea. And my first job was a performing artist. So as a theater artist, I was so in the power of arts. But the commercial, field of theater and performing wasn't a good fit for me. And I realized that after I started acting as a professional actor, then I found this drama therapy. So, of course, I went back to school and studied counseling and became a drama therapist and started to work with, all those marginalized populations that I really enjoyed working with, like juvenile homelessness and, especially, my favorite group to work with was the North Korean refugees. So that work was so rewarding. Of course, at the same time, it was really challenging, but life-changing and so transformative. After I moved to state, I kind of lost that connection with the art and then, community and healing and helping. And I was really struggle with immigration. I became
You were now the refugee immigrant.
Yeah. Yes. Good point.
Your narrative shifted.
Yes. So, as an immigrant, as a foreigner, I never thought I would be minority. Yeah.
Big minority where you were.
So I was really struggling to, to observe that idea. And then I started to realize, like, I need some healing. I need some work on myself. And then I remembered that, my power is in art. Why don't I go back there? And then I started to kind of find the reconnection point. And I was able to come back to, performing. And then I found expressive art therapist community from there. So, I went back. Of course, had to go back to school to get the certificate, and then and then the right track of like becoming a therapist that let me practice here.
Right.
And then we
She
met.
me. So we met in school, expressive arts therapy.
Okay.
First year, first day.
First day of school.
Yeah,
First day
same
of school.
cohort.
Fast friends, and then
And so my journey into expressive arts, I think, started in childhood, probably. Like, I feel like all the trauma that I had as a child and stress, I would take to the arts. Like, I would paint and draw, and I had my own imagination, and I'd macrame and do all kinds of crafts. And fast forward many years, I went to college, and then I went to law school, and I was well, actually, let's back up. When I was in college in psych and art, I worked at Orange County Juvenile Detention, and I went there 2 days a week, and I got to go in and work with a group of youth. And it was amazing because at that time, they were more liberal about what you could bring in. So I would bring in paint and brushes and drums and instruments and cool journaling stuff and clay and toys, and we would make things. And I noticed that these youth I had no skills as a therapist or restorative justice or anything back then. But the one thing I did notice is when we were playing with the materials, everybody got engaged and started interacting and talking in different ways and seemed excited, and the energy levels shift. And then I'd ask them to journal and keep journals. And then I noticed this emergence of hope and excitement about their futures start to arise. And I always attributed it to the making and the doing. And then fast forward for me, I was tired of practicing law. I went into a whole nother career, which we don't need to go into. And I went through a difficult divorce and my mom dying and losing a business all at the same time. And my kids were a mess and I was a mess. And I had kind of lost my art practice like you talked about. And I noticed that it was only through drawing every day and painting every day, even if it was for 5 minutes, and my daughter dancing and my son cooking and playing at drums, that we began to find light in the midst of the dark.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I already know this to be true, that the real healing is for us is in the making and the doing and the arts. And so I quit all my other careers and decided I was going to re-engage with the arts. And then I found the Expressive Arts Institute.
Okay. Man, so both of you kind of came to this as this long, a rediscovery of arts from an earlier stage in life, and a way to work through your own kind of changing lives and
our own grief,
your own grief,
trauma. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And now your grief and trauma has been kind of turned and opened up to help all these people that you guys have engaged with over the years. And so what do you do now? For people that don't really know what expressive arts therapy is, what do you do? Where do you do it?
Should I?
Sure.
Yeah. So expressive art therapy, it is therapy. Expressive art therapy is in a broader term, we use multiple art modalities. It's not only visual art, but we use music and sound, voice, movement, dance, nature, writing, poetry, journaling, and of course, drama, storytelling. And what else? Photography.
It can be anything creative.
It can be creative art modalities. And the reason why we kind of, integrate all those different modality is like we try to meet the client where they are at, what they mostly comfortable with. And then, it's an easy, access to the art, but also it serves the client the way that the client can, like explore their inner and, their situations in a more free form, I would say. Yeah. Open and free form. So my work as a therapist, like I would say there's like two big different, the two fields. Like one part is more like a clinical setting. So I am part of LM Counseling Center. And through that counseling center, I meet individual or couple or group to do sessions, using creative, method to help them heal and, learn about themselves. So it's more like, focusing on clinical setting. But the other part is more like a community setting, because expressive art therapy can apply to like group settings and support groups and, different types of training, classes, workshops. So either way, I want to offer, expressive arts process to bring healing and growth.
And so you've done it both in like a more formal clinical setting, and then also, and that's probably how we got connected, because you came and were doing a women's tea, which was somewhat informal, but where you were probably using a lot of the same kind of modalities. Like women would come, they would drink tea, they would have this like kind of close time together, and you guys would do all kinds of art and just a lot of like beautiful things come in. People loved coming to the tea, and I think COVID
tea and arts,
yeah, two great things. And then and you've done some like improv stuff also. So you kind of work in both of those sort of settings. And would you say that's the same for you, Jamie?
Well, no, because mine's a little bit different, and I think Sook Kyoung missed a big part of her work too, the second step of her work. She talked about LM counseling, but she didn't talk about the creatives patch.
I knew that you are going to bring that up.
So I'm going to back up for a second, because I realized I kind of left a cliffhanger. I was like, oh, in college I worked in Orange County, and worked with juveniles. But what I didn't say is I went ahead and went to law school. And when I was in law school, I felt like while I was in law school, I felt like I shouldn't be there. There was so much conflict, and I was very traumatized by it.
In school itself.
PTSD in school. And then I went ahead and practiced as a trial attorney. And what I realized is, you can make a good argument, you can appear, and you can reduce sentences, and you can do all these things, but I didn't feel like I was helping people with the tools and resources that would build resilience and joy and help them through difficult obstacles and challenges. So I was just doing a quick fix, moment-to-moment thing that didn't have anything to do with like a way of being. And so it felt very shallow and hollow to me. And so that is another reason I gave myself permission to change careers, and it happened coincidentally as a result of all the trauma, right? And so when Sook Kyoung and I both began at the Institute, we had different tracks. She was the individual therapy track, and I was the group conflict resolution and peace building track. And my niche has always been, I do individual work, but I love group work. And I love working with groups that are having a hard time building connection or have obstacles or challenges, and like helping them connect with their senses and their innate wisdom and stuff to build a new way of being together. And so Sook Kyoung and I formed our own company. Well, we've always worked together through school with marginalized populations like unsheltered families and youth, immigrants and refugees. I worked with veterans. We've worked with, who else have we worked with? I've worked with survivors of torture.
And
you do groups in juvenile hall, right?
Neurodivergent adults and kids, and parents of neurodivergent kids, foster youth, like a whole gamut of stuff, right?
Yeah, range.
And incarcerated, like informally incarcerated. And we both had a passion for that, and so we started doing trainings in restorative justice too, and restorative practices when we were in school. And we both took to that instantly and integrated that into expressive arts therapy with all of our group work and became certified in those practices. And so then we have this like little niche business where we work with organizations and groups to who are interested in restorative practices, not necessarily restorative justice, but how do we do restorative practices that build and change community and overcome adversity and harm through restoring tools, right? But we also bring in expressive arts therapy and somatic and body-based sensory work in order to supplement and kind of just weave everything together. And that's where we formed the Creative Patch in also, I think at the tail end of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And we were
During
just
the pandemic.
we were just noticing people were suffering, groups were suffering, and that we needed not just transactional change, we needed something that was life-giving and sustaining, because sometimes we can just create something different for a moment in time, and we wanted to help people start being a different way together.
Yeah, and I mean, you all work with so many different people that have encountered hardship in like all these different ways. And I think part of what strikes me about this, like just the arts in general, but especially the kind of like therapeutic arts and group work that you all do, is that where so many of like the systems that we encounter, you know, I see most of this through the lens of our church work, which is a lot of people, you know, struggling with homelessness, but that touches criminal justice and addiction and, you know, immigration and all those things. Homelessness kind of touches everything, you know. But what I see is that there are all these ways that the world just kind of chews people up, and people engage with these systems that are harsh, and they're meant to sort of sustain themselves. And, you know, the criminal justice system is just trying to kind of get by or something. Like, you know, I've gone to some court cases. I remember I was a witness in a case, and I just came out of there thinking, like, whatever the outcome of this case, like, there is no chance of
Everybody's
justice.
harmed.
Yeah. And so what you all have done is like really dedicate yourself to actually building resilience and connection and community in people that can help people to heal and be able to navigate like just the hardships of life more fully. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, and I think that's the goal of both of our work is like, how do we lean into our existing strengths?
Yeah.
And how do we also enhance those? And how do we build new regulation? And once we can do that, we can build co-regulation and social engagement and connection with other human beings, which is essential to, you know, we know this scientifically, that to ignite our social engagement system cultivates a release of neurobiologically of hormones that allow you to stay regulated and to enhance the way you show up and your sense of self-empowerment and efficacy, and which makes me think about the spiritual community, right? Like when people are very, very stressed or have a lot of trauma, usually what's going on is they are carrying a lot of survival energy in their body, and the chemicals are causing them to check out from themselves in the world and fracturing their relationships, their own sense of being. And it's hard to be spiritual and find the support you need. And when you're like, have all that rampaging through your system.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of how we framed the flow groups that we've developed, which if anyone's listening to this doesn't know what that is, you know, contact us, look on our website. We've done a lot of work around flow groups. I don't think we're going to address that too directly here today, but how we've pitched that group kind of to the community is that these are groups that are meant to be sort of practice groups, healing groups that allow us to actually engage in the spiritual disciplines that we want to engage in. Like we spend so much time in the church talking about cognitive things, learning, belief, doctrine, kind of study and that kind of thing, like the side of our thinking side of our brain. And I think many of us like know what we should do. We know what we want to do, but like the difference between knowing how to be in the world in a way that is, you know, loving others, loving God, learning to love and be at peace with ourselves and walking, you know, learning, like knowing what to do those things and then actually being able to do that are two very different things. And for a lot of people, I think just the trauma, the grief, the hardship that they carry, that we carry, is a big barrier in that. I think we can even have some self-awareness about that. Actually, a lot of people have self-awareness, but then how do you get over that hump? And I think the work that you all are doing is like a big part of that. Does that sound am I on track there?
I mean, I think that switch that goes off when you're able to tap into, like you said, the knowing is one thing. You can educate somebody about their trauma. You can like talk about it verbally, but it's when feeling the sensations and how they affect their body. Mm-hmm. And then also feeling like when we do something like play together, sing a song together, chant together, make a collage or cook bread together, like noticing the shift in our body. Mm-hmm. Like our body is now producing something different feeling-wise. Mm-hmm. And that choosing to feel that, even if it's for small periods at a time, and then you know the feeling so you can begin to create that regulation beyond making the bread or doing the collage or chanting or singing to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like you said it yourself, it's knowing versus being.
Right.
That's a way of to show up for yourself.
Right. Could you guys share just a little bit about like how does trauma specifically, or just like the hardships of all of like just the lives on the margins, how does that affect how do people come to you, you know what I mean, before learning how to regulate? Like how do those things affect our bodies, our minds? You've shared some about it already.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if there isn't really clear boundary of different things that we can look for about, this is what symptoms like, from traumatized person, but there is like emotional part that we can feel not regulated, not in control. Also, there's like a lot of physical symptoms that we suffer, and also, it affects our cognitive ability. But also, overall, spirituality is also affected by trauma and other sufferings. And when I now also think, this society is somewhat misused the term trauma. Traumatized.
Trauma.
Yeah, and sometimes it's overusing and degrading the weight of trauma. So really simply say trauma happens outside and affects inside. So what changed in inside, that's what we call trauma. Mm-hmm. And something that is happening outside affect us. Too big, too much, or too fast. It happened too fast, so we couldn't really find a appropriate way to cope, or too long, too often. Mm-hmm. So trauma isn't something big,
Well,
crash.
It can be.
Yeah, it can be, but not only. Small things add up. And what brings the awareness is when people kind of reach, the tolerance level, I can't really do it anymore, or I don't know, what I can do. And oftentimes, there are close people would notice my friend or my family needs help. Needs something different.
They're either sleepy or they're overreacting to situations.
Yeah.
They're not able to get up and motivate and get normal everyday tasks done. They're not eating right. They're not sleeping right. A lot of usually it's
a whole spectrum. Yeah.
You can notice things that are biological, but everything's so intricately tied. So it's psycho, bio, social, right? It affects your ability to engage with other people. You don't want to talk to other people. You don't want to socialize. You don't want to go out. It can affect you in so many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's so many different layers, so many different areas that we can look after. But but also there is this like mental health stigma still. It's getting better. I really appreciate
Well,
the
especially-
pandemic for that.
Yeah, but especially in a lot of these marginalized populations, the stigma is even worse. Like, because certain populations really frown upon looking to others for help or admitting to the distress of being emotionally distressed.
People don't want to look weak.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And then, oftentimes they just tap into like easier or not helping coping, strategies. And that makes, things worse. And oftentimes it just look normal outside, but when, behind the closed door, they're really suffering and, like feels like, there's no help at all. And what I'm really sad about and is like for a lot. I am Christian myself, and I grew up in church community. All my family. But church also doesn't really support that in a way that it should be. I am not talking as a mental health professional, but I'm talking as a member of the church that sometimes the saying and the learning and the all those practices that we do throughout the church doesn't really support mental health in a way. And sometimes people just believe that, okay, if I just have more faith, it will go over. I'll overcome whatever the problem that I am experiencing now. And I try to educate, try to bring more awareness, especially for my loving church community, that mental health is like just same as physical health. Get checked up, because you're doing annual physical checkup. Mental checkup is like same as that, and get treatment and get help, outside of the church. If they feel like this is kind of like a spiritual thing, they kind of, some people try to just stick with their like religious practice only. Well, I believe that helps, and the ritualistic part of the worship, and then the community that church is offering to the people, that is all really, really good and really supportive. But also, there is strong way, stronger way that they can be healed and treated, and then we can support. So I really want church community have more awareness and more support.
It's so interesting because I grew up in the Jewish faith, and I pretty much despised going to synagogue and going to religious school. And there was like this way of the way people showed up in conversation. Like if you went to services and you were 5 minutes late, you were frowned on or locked out, right? If you didn't sit perfectly still in the Reformed synagogue, you were a bad person, right? If you got up to go to the bathroom, you were a bad person. So if you were taking care of your bodily impulses or needs, you were a bad person. And then when we'd have supposed community like discussions with the rabbi, like the way people would talk over each other and tell each other they don't know what they're talking about, and like, it's supposed to be this rabbinical dialogue and discussion, right? But it was like disrespectful the way it was done. And like other people's opinions didn't count, or differences of opinions didn't count. And so I've often thought about if I hadn't gone to Jewish sleepaway camp in the mountains where we had relationship with nature and we got to play together and do other things together, I probably would have rejected my religion, probably. But it was like this other environment where people were curious about me, and instead of arguing, we made challah together, we danced together, we sang prayers together, we built Jewish altars or like wrote our own prayers and Torahs. Like it was much more open where everybody got to participate, everybody mattered. We learned and cultivated values and morals instead of just being told what your morals and values should be. And so I think it does bring into question, which is part of the work we all got involved with Shelley Rambo at Boston University,
Right.
which is how can we, whether it's spiritual or otherwise, in terms of our organizations and congregations, how can we help people be concerned about how does trauma impact the way people show up and how organizations and structures run? So what do we need to do to support people so that we can build healthier hives where people feel connected, everybody wants to take part in it, everybody feels like they have an important role, right? So that we all rise together. And so I think that all spiritual organizations, all companies, all healthcare, everybody needs it.
Yeah.
Because like Sook Kyoung was talking about, what is trauma? It's too much for too long, and your body like loses its ability to stay regulated. Like all of a sudden you have no energy. All of a sudden you feel like you can't accomplish anything. There's a problem. And so, that can happen to anyone. I mean, one of my mentors calls today a trauma scene instead of Paleocene. That trauma is so wide right now, but it's not PTSD level trauma. There's all different levels of trauma.
Right.
But if it's interfering with your ability to do daily chores and find some amount of joy in your day,
Meaningful relationships.
then you're having trauma response.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring up the sleepover camp, because so many of, like, when we were learning some of the modalities early on with you, as you all were teaching us, like what you do in your groups.
It's like going to camp, right?
Well, so many of them, I was like, we literally did this at high school camp, like and it brings you back to that. And those experiences are so good for so many people. I think exactly because of what you're saying, because they're deeply connecting, they're physical, and there's just this like way of getting out of kind of the kind of strict structures of like your normal life and into this like kind of wild place where you're free to.
Somewhere somebody told us where it became not okay to play.
Yeah.
Right? Like formal sports or formal board games are okay, but like just play and laughter and listening to each other in that playful way all of a sudden became irresponsible.
Yeah.
Instead of this is a way of being and connecting and having relationship.
Yeah. Well, and especially I feel like in church settings where we want to take everything so seriously. I think like as I'm a pastor, obviously, I think like part of our role is to try to get people to take their spiritual lives seriously, that this stuff matters. And it's always a fight for priorities with work and family and everything else, and to say like this stuff matters. And so there's this, I feel like we have this pressure to like, no, you like pay attention to this stuff, but then the stuff is like when you take it too seriously, it kind of loses itself in a way. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to like there needs to be joy in it and play in it, and that can be challenging sometimes.
Well, what I love about religious groups, can be a very good platform to offer this kind of service.
Right.
It's like school has their thing, education, focus on education, but religious congregations. The ritualistic part, if we see that, there's like so many good elements already. Like you said, like, there is always music involved. There is like poetry. We read, scriptures, we recite them. And there is always like, inviting movement together, the ritualistic movement together. And of course, the prayer, all those things. And, we do retreat, we do small groups. So I think, those religious practices have like potentials. And I believe, we might lost some of those, like, the first beginning of this, grouping and healing process on the way. So it's more like, reconnecting to our like genuine instinct of like this brings us hope, this brings us joy, this brings us like strong feeling of connection, because it happens on a spiritual level.
That's so interesting, because I was talking to a friend the other day who was talking about, I went with them to church and they were going up for communion and the cracker, and I was like asking questions, and then we left and we were having an hors d'oeuvre somewhere, and I was like, so what goes through your mind when you get out of your seat and you're standing in line and you walk up there and you wait and then they give it to you? And he's like, nothing. Like, I'm just going up there to get my cracker and like da-da-da. But I'm like, so like, do you notice the energy of the people around you? Do you feel the heaviness of somebody's heart? Do you like think about your footsteps and your journey from your seat up to there? And like, so we had this really deep, really profound conversation, and he's like, huh. And I'm like, well, I go like, now when I fold the laundry, I take the laundry out and I hug it and I go, oh my gosh, this feels so warm.
Warm and soft
and cuddly. And oh my gosh, I needed that hug from the laundry. And then I go to the counter and I start folding and I'm like, oh, this is such a nice movement. Like, so I'm finding something within something that gives us back to our unconscious and our spirituality and our way of being. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, and I'm talking about, is sometimes we get so, life is so busy, there's so much to do, there's so many hard things that we're tasked with every day, that we lose this reflective ability that engages our senses, that naturally helps us build resilience, because it's a neurobiological response, right? And it might be picking up my Superwoman because off the shelf to support me today, because, I need a little bit of oomph or whatever, but she gives me that.
Yeah.
And like, oh, she makes me laugh. She's fun to play with. And we don't give ourselves enough of that.
If you're just listening to this, Jamie has like a little figure of Wonder Woman. It's like a rubber figure, and both her so can kind of pick the figure. They have a lot of toys here with it, and so they've got one on the video.
This is my
and support. But like having that tangible physical little thing and that like physical connection, and then I think not just having it, as you're saying with the communion story, but like becoming aware enough to actually enjoy and be present in the thing. I mean, to me,
you were saying, well, she's crooked, like she's leaning, and I'm like, well, even Superwoman or Wonder Woman has her days where, like,
has to lean somewhere.
You have to lean. I need to lean on the speaker. I need to lean on Sook Kyoung Kwon and Chris. Like, it's okay. It doesn't make me less. Two things can be true at the same thing. I can need some help and still be Superwoman.
For sure. And I think that's where sometimes the message of the church, and my experience is in the church, mostly in the Protestant lower church traditions, it's like we're like kind of like what I hear you saying, Sook Kyoung, and I really have come to see this as we've done the work over the last few years. Like it's right there for the church. It's right there, but so often we push against the things that actually bring healing, and I think the church tends to expand our sense of isolation by making it all this individual thing that we're doing. It's about your faith and your decisions and your practice, and are you having your quiet time, and are you reading by yourself, and are you in your study, and kind of breaking it down from the communal work that we are meant to be doing together, which I think goes against our actual theology and doctrine.
And it goes against your neurobiology.
And it goes against our neurobiology, yeah. And then, so on that sense, and then I think we also, like, there's this pressure to, like, hyper-spiritualize everything, which makes it disembodies our practices and our beliefs.
More like, I would call that hyper-cognitive.
Okay, hyper-cognitive.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's right, because I think what it is, I mean, I can get into this, it's like it goes back to Plato, and this separation of mind and body.
Dualism.
Yeah, this dualism where, the physical is kind of bad, or at least it's not worth pursuing. And I think a lot of churches stress about getting too much, like the church I grew up in had no art anywhere. It was very kind of stark. It was in a warehouse type setting. Yeah, and we're not in a traditional church space at Living Water either, but we do have art around and stuff. But I think it was intentional, and they would talk about it because they were kind of pushing back against some of the rituals and art and, thinking of some of the things that are in like the Catholic Church or other high church traditions that are sort of more ornate, because they don't want us to get caught in the ritual. They want us to get caught in the belief. And I think that's like a dualism that's just like a false dualism. And when we sort of strip those things of ourselves, I mean, of course we don't want to worship the painting or whatever,
Right.
but like if we can incorporate art and beauty and sensory things, smell and taste and all those things into our spiritual lives in ways that connect us to one another, that's where like all the healing happens, right? And that's where the vibrancy of our spiritual lives and the joy and that's where this stuff it's like I said, it's just like right there. And I feel like it gets me really excited because like I feel like I don't know that we've sort of figured out how to maximize it in our church community. I think we're getting better at it. We're learning, but it just feels like there's like a breakthrough right there if we, and as the church, bigger than just my little church, if we can kind of step through the thing, then there's like potential for lots of healing and goodness.
I love that. And I was thinking it's been a couple months now, but I was in synagogue for an event, and we sang together, and and I noticed when we sing together, I immediately feel peace, right?
Oh, yeah.
I feel calm. And I was thinking about like we sang together, cantor got off stage, rabbi went on, and I was like, the somatic practitioner and expressive arts therapist in me was like, wouldn't it be beautiful if the rabbi had said, "Wow, did you all witness and just hear all the vast, beautiful individual voices, how they came together." And like everybody's voice is different. Even people had different tunes and sounds. And like, what was that like for you? Like, think about it, like how magnificent that is. And like that breath and that sharing the breath and like just capitalizing on the connection. Because I noticed there was people who weren't singing too. And oftentimes the people who aren't singing don't feel safe singing.
Right.
Because they're worried about their voice or being out of tune, like me, who I'm always out of tune. But because I'm an expressive arts therapist, I've somehow overcome that. I don't care because the joy brings me more, right? But like it gives us freedom to deepen our ritual and to deepen our connection. And that's just like a little teeny thing the spiritual leader in my instance could have done that, in my opinion, could have like connected people in a whole nother way. And it would have taken 10 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, so just going back to the camp thought, like some of the most sort of moving times in camp was in like music worship together.
Absolutely.
You have all these high school kids. There's no shame. Everyone's just kind of belting out.
100%.
And I've never been a singer, but like I don't have to worry about my voice because everyone's singing so loud. No
I
one's
agree.
listening to me. But now in church, every time, even though it's usually like Rachel or one of my kids sitting next to me, I'm still thinking the whole time I'm singing, I'm like, are they listening to me? Because I know I don't have, and I like if we could all sort of collectively give into and release those inhibitions, then like there's this profound experience there for us. Yeah.
And in that experience, like at the Jewish camp, it was not for Shabbat, it was like hours of singing and dancing after Shabbat dinner. And like holding hands and running around and doing the dances. And I'm like, they don't give us permission to do this at the synagogue. Why not?
Right. Well, so
At a wedding, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am like, sometimes like really angry about, the education system. Like, that's actually, like give all our children, not like, encourage them to enjoy
Right.
all those like sensory things, but more like, give them a little bit of shame and fear.
You're not good enough voice.
Right.
You don't
That
draw
not
good enough. Yeah.
Like, you're not an artist. And, you have to have certain voice to sing. You have to have certain skills to, enjoy painting. You have to have certain body to, move
Be a
and
theater
dance.
dancer.
Yeah. And that fear is like, everywhere now. Like every individual carries a certain amount of that fear that is like, it's not only self-conscious about like how to present in the world, but it's more like how to be. So, if we can reconnect with that, like, innocent, childlike, joy of playing, joy of enjoy our body, joy of like using our senses and whatever we are given from God, in a playful way, we call that, the psychological term is like range of play. So I think usually we start like open
a child
range.
has massive range of
open
play.
range, the unlimited possibility, and then it's like and then we become so rigid. So one of the focus emphasis that through expressive arts, we're trying to bring up is like, okay, we can extend the range. We can open up the range.
And you
so can
titrate
play.
it.
Yeah.
Titrate it by giving little
bit of.
and they don't require skill. Like this notion in the schools that you have to be an artist or you're not an artist is just not right. Like we are all born. This is what expressive arts philosophy is. We're all born creative human beings. And we all have the capacity to engage our imagination. We all have the capacity to play. And so how can we use our hands, if we don't have hands, parts of our body, our senses, to be playful and explore different surfaces, different touch, different smells, different tastes, and see what things do. And through that, it enlivens you. It starts to build, get your system to start to feel safe and playful. I mean, we were just working in the jail yesterday with some women, and we started really slow with just make a sound together. And then we said, like, let's bring in another sound and let's add. And it got so...
Yeah, we did body full.
It got so playful. So these women
yeah.
who are 100% shut down, no range of play, like barely can get out of bed to come to our group.
Right.
And come in like this. And they were like...
Yeah, stand up and move and yeah.
And everybody played along. But it was also individually they wouldn't do that. So it was us giving them an invitation, and then there being no shame and like
no judgment,
and seeing that you can be playful and not be judged, and then it becomes easier and grows the range.
Yeah.
And so magic can really, I always tell clients and groups that we can be our own magician. And we can trick our nervous system into releasing happy hormones, healthy connection hormones. And we have the control to do it. Like I can come in here and complain to you about my horrible day and everything that happened and everything's wrong. Or I could come in and go, oh my gosh, look at all these. I wonder what her story is. Right? And then start having a story with Sook Kyoung. And at least for the moment, I'm releasing new hormones that can build a potential new way of being, maybe for 5 minutes now, maybe 20 minutes later, but these things can help completely change our nervous system. And so that's the power of, expressive arts isn't about like fine arts.
Yeah.
It's about engaging anything with your imagination and creativity so that you can use it as a tool or resource to build resilience and joy and curiosity and fun. And like how I can play with her, but she also has a story, so I can write a story. Oh, she probably has a song, a soundscape. What would she be singing? And then write the song, dance to the song, and then you're changing your whole story through the third. So you're able to not, sometimes in talk therapy, when we keep talking about our own story, it's too vulnerable and it will re-traumatize us. But if things start to come out with her, it's outside of us. So we can revisit it in a way that feels safe.
Yeah, a lot of the creative mediums, like there's enough you can be kind of vulnerable in a measured way because you don't have to be so on the point of like, this is exactly what happened to me. I'm sharing, the worst moment of my life or something, but you can express the emotion of that and the just all sorts of aspects of that while keeping the event itself kind of shrouded a little bit and only expose what you want to, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think, and I think all this, like, I think for this is a church podcast and a churchy audience, and I think like where this is really exciting for me in the on the faith front is that like this is the stuff that can help us to lead vibrant spiritual lives, which to me is not just about believing the right things. I think theology matters, and I've spent a lot of my life studying theology, but I think learning, like the education is not just that cognitive intellectual thing. It's like our physical education and how to actually connect with other people, right? If we're supposed to love God and love others, then that means we have to learn how to be a little bit vulnerable with other people and open up to them and receive their vulnerability, right? And if we want to like learn how to serve and do hard things that God may be calling us to do, we have to have some resilience and some strength that like we don't, if we're always kind of closed up on ourselves, if we're always feeling threatened, if we're always kind of pushing everyone away because we just kind of can't handle opening ourselves up, we have this narrow range of play, as you guys said, or we have all this rigidness in ourselves, then we're not going to actually enjoy the life that God has given us, and we're not going to actually be a joy to be around for others.
Well, he's not asking of you just a belief system. He's asking for you to have a way of being.
Right, exactly.
Just like if you're a restorative practitioner, it's not like in this setting I'm restorative. It's
yes.
like BEING, being it all the time.
Right.
Well, of course we're human. We make errors, but how do I be a good spiritual person all the time? There's values and ways of being that you want to embody.
Right. If I want to be a person of hope, then maybe doing some of the things you were just describing.
Right.
Instead of just kind of cycling through all the negative stuff, which many of us, we're all doom scrolling and, there's so much negativity and cynicism. This is confessional for me because I'm like too cynical, right? But if I can learn how to kind of turn myself towards more of this hopeful stuff and more of the creativity and the openness and the joy, then that can affect my whole life, right? And the lives of everyone around me. Yeah.
And I love when working with you with the flow group, right? Like have the privilege of hearing back from people within the groups or from people running the groups that the things that would happen for people that would enhance their spirituality, would enhance their way of being able to embrace and act in alignment with their values and morals, right? And, for me, one of the big breakthroughs is in 2023, a book finally came out, The Brain on Art. And because we've always called the research we've done in expressive arts-based research. So by interviews and by, your artistic response to this, the poem or the song is the research that it matters. But now somebody finally did a good job of compiling, like scientific, because, right, our world relies on the brain scans and the body scans and the scientific.
You got to justify everything.
It's part of the brain, right?
Evidence over there.
So now we know that certain parts of the brain that enhance resilience light up when we're engaging in all of these artistic, creative, embodied forms like dance, poetry, music, chanting, singing. And so we're like, okay, here's the science for you scientific people who don't buy into the importance. Like, it's not arts and crafts. It's not unnecessary play. It's part of, like, indigenous cultures around the world. There's a reason that they live an artistic life that's in connection with nature.
Yeah.
And that's because it allows us to be resilient, thriving individuals versus like surviving.
Right.
And there's like all of those things our body picks up neurologically on our environment, and we interocept constantly and exterocept safety. So if we're out of equilibrium and don't find all of these things, the interaction and the health that we can derive from these tools, then no wonder we're out of balance. I mean, it's just...
And spiritual traditions have been doing this stuff forever, right? That's the irony of it is
Right. And they've known it forever.
yeah, we've known this for thousands of years. Now there's like brain scans and scientific ways to sort of measure things. But now we've got to call the spiritual communities back to doing what has been a part of the tradition.
Well, just like acupuncturists and alternative medicine people
Right.
have known this because they're intuitive and they listen to the body's wisdom, as do spiritual leaders. They're with people, they're connected to people, they're reading people. Modern medicine was based on a cadaver. The nervous system understanding was based on a cadaver in the past. So we really didn't understand this stuff until we actually had more of these light up systems. So once again, I think expressive arts and all of this spirituality is about listening to our inner wisdom, which is often right? And then we've lived in a world that has turned us towards we have to read it in a textbook or somebody has to have told us it's okay to do that. We can't trust that. And so it's like you said, that's so interesting. Spiritual people have been doing it for centuries.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time.
We gotta get back to our own roots and our own tradition and our own practices.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest art in the history of the world is all coming out of spiritual traditions and spiritual,
Absolutely.
People paying for spiritual art that depict the stories and the symbols and the things that have been so meaningful for us for so long.
So it's all about reconnecting, restoring, the beauty and the wisdom that we always had.
Yes.
But I think what's really important is this can all sound like great, right? But we live in a modern world where there's a lot of stress, a lot of aggravation, a lot of situations. And so the ability to find things that first educating yourself about your own nervous system so that you can tell when you might need some help and some support. And educating yourself, what does support look like? Support could be walking in the grass or smelling the flowers, right? It doesn't have to be something that's super expensive. And so that's knowing that enlivening the senses is going to bring you to the present moment.
Right.
And it's going to help you release and trick your nervous system into releasing some healthy hormones. And it may just get you through the day. You may have to go then treat yourself to your favorite food or a hot bath. Like sometimes we just have to keep doing healthy alternative things that do enliven our senses.
Yeah. And it kind of reverses the spiral, right? Like as we can spiral downward into the negative stuff where, you start feeling bad, so then you develop a bad habit, and then that makes you feel worse, and then it breaks your connections, and then you kind of go. But you can reverse the cycle if you start to, as you're saying, kind of trick your nervous system, or if you start to do the practices that you should do.
You can rewire your brain and just choose by, the choices we make.
Yeah.
But we don't have capacity to make different choices sometimes when we're so depressed, right?
Yeah, right.
And so that's when we really need help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the spiritual communities. We have each other to lift each other up. We can be there for someone else who maybe doesn't have the capacity to do it themselves, and we can invite them into a space of worship or a space of the flow groups or the space of like community connection and say, hey, come sing with us. If you can't sing, that's okay. Just sit there and listen to the rest of us sing. And we can kind of lift each other up in that way too.
And always I encourage people to think about spiral up, spiral down. So there is no perfection of healthy state. So it's always fluctuating. And it's okay to feel bad sometimes. It's okay to feel depressed. It's just knowing that, you're aware enough, how your body and how your emotion feels like. And then, you have enough tools and skills to do the spiral up. So spiral up doesn't this or it takes time, it takes practice, but just knowing that and have some good tools and skills here and there, and also if you have supporting people, supporting community, that's enough. Good enough practice, good enough self-care, good enough, feeling.
But we all say that. And the reality is we don't live in a world where good enough is okay. You're supposed to be happy. Happy is a bad word, right? Because that's not life. It is a spiral. Like I
Right.
can be happy and sad at the same time. And I can feel both emotions 1,000 times all day long. And I can be happy and angry. And so I think we have to like
Yeah, so try not to be perfect. Try not to be like, social media perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other part of this is like social media really puts this pressure on us. Even in like the art stuff, right? Like, because we're no longer just trying to be, like a fun, like you don't just have to be a good singer in your little cluster of friends. You're now competing with like the entire world. You know what I mean? And the best singers in the world have the most popular TikToks, and everyone else stinks, and and there's this way that just further drives us away from it. But if we can get rid of that competitive edge, and if we can learn to enjoy it for the sake of itself, and not have to be, you don't have to be an influencer to enjoy dancing, right?
Really, I really want to talk and tell the younger generations, please rethink about connection. So the connection that you're making through social media might not be good enough for you. So there's other ways. We're losing a lot of real touch, lot of intimate connection, lot of offline relationships. And I know there is cons and pros of connection through social media and technology brings a lot of possibilities, the good things, of course, but especially for the younger generations, they were exposed to social media and technology way too soon, way too young, and that kind of blocked them from having different level of connection within nature, within physical touch, physical being together, and it became kind of normal that way. So I think this society and as grown up, as adult, we have to try really hard to break that stigma, and then try to offer alternatives, which we believe it's more genuine way of connection.
Right. Which is often less convenient. But then if you think about it, that's how you end up having all these negative coping. That's how people end up addicted to meth, right? Is because it's a convenient way to escape your problem. It's easy and quick, but eventually it leads you into more destructive patterns. I think social media is kind of, maybe not to that extent, it's not like developing a meth habit and, being too on, Snapchat or whatever too much isn't the same thing, but it is kind of similar where you go for the cheap fix of this connection, and it may be harder to actually get together with people.
I read an article the other day that said that social media creates the isolation that has increased the suicide rate. So it's thinking social media is a substitute, right?
Right.
Then people, that's not real interaction, right? There's no honesty, there's no vulnerability, it's makes you feel bad, right? And then it's become such a large thing, and that's some people's only way of interacting.
Right.
And that it's their mental health is so bad that it results in suicide. And those are the highest numbers of suicide rates are people who actually are suffering from isolation, but it's been because of social media.
Yeah, it's not just a warning. It's scientific research that shows, how it affects our daily life and, relationships and the way that we think and we feel. So I think, this generation, we really have to, pay more attention to, how to provide them different experiences.
Yeah.
We all know when we force ourselves, like you said, sometimes it's hard. You go, I don't want to go to that thing. And you go and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Right? And it's because
connecting in a different way.
With human live beings, which releases oxytocin and dopamine, which is very hard to release on your own in many circumstances.
Yeah. So come to church.
I've been to your church. It's lovely. Many times.
Yeah, like come and connect and come and be in person and come and like do the sometimes slightly harder thing that's a little less convenient. We're talking about doing even this on Zoom, and here we are in person, and it's so much better.
But what I find, Chris, so Living Water allows, like, as a stranger who walks in there, whether it be for Thanksgiving or for group or just coming by on a Sunday, it feels like a very open place to walk into, and a safe place to walk into. So obviously you're doing a lot of things right, but I think a lot of spiritual places do not feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think that is a travesty, because I do think, and I've had this conversation many times with my children, that feeling safe to be spiritual to whatever level you want to be spiritual within a place where other people are being spiritual is one of the quickest places to regulate your nervous system.
Right.
And to feel seen, supported, heard, and safe. And so it's a real shame that I know we talk about growing this work all the time. Like, how do we get spiritual congregations to really embrace this so that they're all thinking about what could happen?
Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, part of the church community, myself, like, I often, offer, my program to my community, and doing the flow group, like, last 3-4 years, we try to train new facilitators from so they can kind of, spread out, into the whole community and, bring this work into their community. That's our hope, but it's not easy. I see, two challenges there, just limiting to religious congregations. First is the authority matter. So oftentimes pastors and spiritual leaders have all those authority to teach, to train, to offer programs, and other members are more like humble to become a leader and then offer programs rather than just like supporting. And also the other challenges I see is like one, it's not easy to become a facilitator and to lead such a group, but also, there is lack of belief that art can help.
Right.
So we have to kind of like, not fighting, but, work through that two different, challenges within congregation also. And through Counseling Center, the LM Counseling Center is also nonprofit, but Christian faith-based organization, and we try to offer this type of program like flow group or other training classes to church communities. So I did some retreat programs for church members, but when we're try to reach out to the leaders of the congregations, they're more like
that's nice.
Yeah, is it like biblical?
Right.
So there is still like a high wall to climb. So Chris, that's your job.
It is. No, and I kind of laugh, but I really do think that that's kind of what I've been wrestling with, and not just me. Like, I think we've had conversations together about this. How do we share this? Because, like I said, it's right there. It's right there for church communities, for faith communities of different sorts. How do we kind of share it in a concise way, not in an hour-long podcast that someone has to listen to in order to kind of get it, but like, how do we get through to folks that like this is actually something that can be tremendously enriching for a spiritual community, for individuals in that community, can bring healing to people who are really struggling, and the world is a hard place right now. I think even people who, our church is a lot of folks that are on the street and like really, really struggling in like severe crisis all the time. But I think even sort of middle-class people, like life is just hard right now in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of forces that pull us into isolation, that kind of pull us out of our bodies. And this stuff can be so good and healing. We have to find a way to do it. We're gonna do it, and we're gonna figure out a way to share this. Whether it's we need to write about it, we need to do some more podcasts, not just mine, but like we're working on it. And if there's any funders out there, Lily decided not to fund it, but we will find someone who's going to help us get this off the ground. We're committed.
I'm wondering, like, I think there's this big trauma responsive movement or trauma informed movement for all enterprises right now.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this notion that spirituality itself is trauma informed, just like there's that same notion in restorative justice, right?
Yeah.
Like people assume because it's restorative justice, it's trauma informed. And spirituality, why wouldn't it be trauma informed? We're here to help people. We're here to expose them to. But I think that's where the ignorance is of what is trauma and how does it affect our spirituality and how do we show up. But also people don't want to focus on trauma. So then you're like, so it's like this resilience building. Like, how do we couch it with leaders so that we're actually can catch their attention?
Well, it's one of those things where everybody wants to talk about trauma and stuff, but they all want to talk about it in other people. They never want to like, deal with it in themselves, or kind of.
I know somebody.
Yeah, that like we all carry it, and it's like it's not just like you have trauma or you don't. I think there are severe forms of PTSD and stuff that's a little different than like your everyday, but like we've all experienced hardship. We've all had people that have bullied us or marginalized us in different ways. We all have these things that it's either been too long, right, or too intense, or too much, too fast. We all have those things that we carry with us, and even if we don't, this is the other thing that I've been trying to tell folks, like even if we don't, having a strong central nervous system that is like well adapted and having these practices in place can make us more resilient in case we do face the trauma.
Well, that's the idea with resilience building and doing this work.
Yeah, there's always a little better version of you.
Sure, always. Well, I feel like we always can talk forever. I think we may have even gone past Jamie's time. Sorry, Jamie, but we should wrap this up. We'll get you guys back sometime, and thank you again so much for
It was so fun.
and all these years of work. We really appreciate you guys, and glad to have the connection, and so good to be here in person with you. So, any final words?
No, I'm just grateful for this opportunity and grateful for the work you do and grateful for the desire for us all to spread the work. Like, it's not the word, it's the work. That's not the word, it's the work.
Yes.
All right. Well, for those listening, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Later.